New aerial footage has been released of the terror attack on the Georgia Police Training Center, and it's quite shocking. In the video, you can see a massive horde of far-left extremists, black-clad, breaking onto this property where they begin to conduct a terror campaign, throwing bricks at cops, explosives, fire bombs, setting fire to construction equipment, vehicles, etc. I've seen a lot in my day, and I talked about this the other day, but this is the worst I've ever seen it. And a lot of people have said, yes, but don't forget about the Weather Underground, Tim. Remember the Weather Underground? And they were bombing stuff. Yeah, I wasn't alive for that. So maybe, I'm a youngin' compared to those who experienced the Weather Underground stuff. But I've never seen anything like this, and I think this is probably worse. Granted, we had one cop shot. One of the terrorists was killed by the police. But what's worrying here is the corporate press running defense for these people. I mean, look at this image. This is crazy. Look at all of these people. This was an attack. And now we're learning that the Southern Poverty Law Center is defending one of the domestic terrorists who was there on the ground. Now, here's what they're going to try and do. They're going to try, it was 150 Antifa that attacked. Okay, this is not a protest or a demonstration. It was a terror attack. And the Southern Poverty Law Center wants to defend their lawyer, saying he's just an observer, an observer. I wonder. This observer who worked for the Southern Poverty Law Center was there in a defensive capacity. So when the police in New York City send out their TARU units, these are cops that have cameras and film things. They're just there as observers. They're not there as police, right? They're not participants. They're not employed they're not in any way associated with the actions the police are engaged in. No, of course not. That's absurd. Every activist will tell you that when the police legal observers and when the police videographers come out, they're working at the behest and for the protection and defense of the NYPD. So now they'll want to claim, no, this lawyer was just there observing for legal reasons. When an insurgent force attacks a government institution and facility and burns it to the ground, and along with them are people of various function, notably their lawyers who are there to defend them, do we just say, no, they're not involved in any way? Or do we say, they're an apparatus of the attack? See, look, if this was a protest and there were people standing in the street, I'll explain it for you. The legal observers come out and they watch the protests. And the protesters are in the street and they get arrested for obstructing a roadway. The legal observers tend not to obstruct the roadways. They stand off to the side, breaking no laws, committing no crimes. Then when the police make the arrests, the observers, who are lawyers, can give statements saying, here's what I saw happen. This is different. This is breaking into a government facility, granted under construction, and watching as your associates destroy it. And then you say, I'm just here to legally defend them when they get arrested? No, it doesn't work that way. You have actively committed the crime along with them. Now, maybe this lawyer wasn't throwing the fire bombs. That's fine. We saw a couple of lawyers in New York actually do that. But they are there to aid and abet a terrorist attack. There's a lot to be said. I got this story that I want to talk about later. A Daily Wire employee quitting because Matt Walsh was too mean. And this is why the right loses. But I'll explain that in the later segment. I just want to say, when you have the far left engaging in terroristic tactics, and then you and the media, I should say you as in the corporate press, keep defending this. It's a demonstration. No, call it what it is. Terrorist insurgency. New footage. Shocking aerial footage. So here we have among those charged an attorney for the hard left Southern Poverty Law Center. Astonishingly, the SPLC has claimed the arrests which followed the outrageous violence were heavy-handed. Amazing. Check this out. Let's play some of this video footage. You can see it for yourself. Look at this horde. This mob, a terrorist insurgency, black-clad, armed with lethal weapons. Now, okay, I don't know if any of them had guns. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. but they have explosives and firebombs and bricks. The firebombs, that's lethal force, and some of the most brutal lethal force, to be completely honest. Now, where we're going with this, I have a lot of people who say there will not, there cannot, there should not be a civil war. Look, there should not be a civil war. It means China wins if the U.S. breaks apart. But I don't know if we have a choice. I don't know if choice is a matter to be discussed. We can certainly talk about the choice to try and resist. But come on. I don't know how we've come to this point, and there are people telling me I'm wrong or crazy to suggest this, when my initial basis for why I feel a civil war is possible, and there is a potential for it, it's based on national security advisors who gave interviews to corporate press, and it's based on former CIA. It's based on a Princeton professor, all saying the same thing. We are in it. Now, in 2018, 5 years ago, when I said the violence that we saw, 5 years ago, the violence that we saw in the streets could be the precursor to a civil war, I had all of these conservatives saying, oh, shut up, Antifa and the Proud Boys. No, it's not. And I said, what about when the ideological split makes its way to the highest levels of government? And they said it won't happen. The national security state is too strong. But here we are. Elon Musk calls out J6 committee for withholding evidence for partisan political reasons after Tucker Carlson revelations. That's right. You saw the segment earlier that I did. Maybe you didn't. Or you saw Tucker's definitive proof that the shaman, the Q shaman they called him, Jake Chansley, is innocent. He is walking peacefully through the Capitol building with a police escort as police officers. Not only do they not try to stop him, they actively assist. They try to open doors for him. Oh, they're locked. Come this way. Then they find an open door to which he says, thank you, officers, for letting us in. Really? I didn't know it was illegal to be let into a building by police and given a guided tour and escort. But you see, this is the point. The partisan split has made it from the streets to the federal government, and then some. And the Democrats are willing to withhold evidence that would exonerate an innocent man if it empowers them. So tell me now, as we see 150 far-left extremists, some from France, Canada, one, a lawyer for the Southern Poverty Law Center, engaging in direct terrorism. At a certain point, terrorism becomes civil war. You had in Syria, Bashar al-Assad saying, these aren't protesters, they're terrorists. I am not saying that we should or shouldn't be using terminology in this context. What I'm saying is you have one faction, you have another faction. One group rises up and gets violent and starts burning things, blowing things up, throwing explosives. Then you have another faction respond saying it's terrorism. And where did that lead us in Syria? Outright civil war. Now, of course, the big question is, who's going to get the support from foreign entities? Russian pundits were talking on one of their Russian TV shows, and they said the real question is not whether a civil war will happen in the U.S., it's which side do we fund and arm? Yep. That's where I believe we are headed. Now, some people still don't believe it. They want to act like it won't happen. It can't happen. We've even had Sarah Silverman calling for a national divorce of some sort. Celebrities are entertaining it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, February 22nd. Insider says MTG defends her call to split up the U.S. by saying the country is moving towards another civil war. We have to do something about it. Well, actually, I understand the sentiment. I think we are headed towards a civil war, but splitting up the U.S. is what would cause it. You see, the first Civil War, states seceded. The Union said no. War broke out. The thing is, civil war typically, as we know it, was when two factions or more fight for control of a centralized governing authority. And then in the U.S., something different happened. The country was splitting in half. Well, that's not a civil war. That's more like a revolution or a secessionist war. The South didn't want control of D.C. They could have taken it. I think it was the first Battle of Bull Run. The Confederates stopped at D.C. and said, "We are not aggressing upon you. We're leaving." And they could have stormed into D.C. and seized the seats of power. The Confederacy, had they done that, would have won the war, potentially. Okay, I'm not going to pretend. I'm not a scholar on this, but I've watched several documentaries and read a few academic papers. In my limited understanding, it seems the Confederacy had a great opportunity to win the war outright, but they did not want the world or the North to see them as aggressors. They simply wanted to go their own way. But the North said no. Ultimately, the South was defeated. The North had better aid, international aid, and they had better weapons. In fact, I think the Battle of Gettysburg, which was really interesting, the Confederates were using muzzle-loaded rifled muskets. And the Union, they were using breech-loading rifles. A breech-loading rifle breaks at the top, break action, and they would push a cartridge in the back, close it, put a percussion cap on it, bang, fire, pop it open, do the same thing. They could reload much faster than the Confederates, who were putting the ball in powder and then stuffing it down the front. That gave them a huge advantage. But if the Confederates just went into D.C. right away, it was over. Now, as for Civil War, I think something that y'all need to understand, which you talked about last night on Timcast IRL, but we'll give you the monologue here. The Spanish Civil War, I think, makes more sense. And maybe that's the track we're following. Maybe it won't be until 1936. I'm sorry, 2036. The Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939. Hear this, my friends. It's important. They say it was a civil war in Spain fought between the Republicans and the Nationalists. Republicans were loyal to the left-leaning Popular Front of the Second Spanish Republic and consisted of various socialists, communists, separatists, anarchists, and Republican parties, some of which had opposed the government in the pre-war period. The opposing nationalists were an alliance of phalangists, monarchists, conservatives, and traditionalists led by a military junta among whom General Francisco Franco quickly achieved a predominant role. Due to the international political climate at the time, the war had many facets and was variously viewed as a class struggle, a religious struggle, a struggle between dictatorship and republican democracy, between revolution and counter-revolution, and between fascism and communism. Sound familiar? Sounds a whole lot like what's going on right now. Now, in the end, the nationalists won the war, ended in 1939, and they ruled Spain until Franco's death in November of 1975. They say the war began after the partial failure of the coup d'etat of July 1936 against the Republican government by a group of generals of the Spanish Republican Armed Forces, with General Emilio Mola as the primary planner and leader, and having General Jose Sanjurjo, or is it Sanjuro? I can't pronounce it, I don't know, as a figurehead. The government at the time was a coalition of Republicans supported in the Cortes by communist and socialist parties under the leadership of the center-left President Manuel Anzania. The nationalist group was supported by a number of conservative groups, including CETA, monarchists, including both the opposing Alfonsists and the religious conservative Carlists, and the Falange Española de las Jones, a fascist political party. After the death of Sanjuro, I don't know, Emilio Mola and Manuel Goded Lopez, I don't know, Franco emerged as the remaining leader on the nationalist side. Here's what you need to consider. It is 2023. It was 1936 when all that went down in Spain. Not 100 years. Maybe what we're seeing will not come to this level of conflict until 2036. That's 13 years. I want you to understand one thing. Well, more than one thing, but let me just say this. A child who was 10 years old in 2016 will be voting in next year's election. Do you understand what that means? The 10-year-old who saw on the TV all of the lies and the screaming of Trump, whose parents shook them by the shoulders. Trump! They lived it. They are embodiments of it. And when they're older, their parents are going to say, I warned you about this, and now you're 18. I can't believe you have to live through it all over again. And they're going to vote against Trump. They're going to vote for socialism and for communism. We are seeing it expand and emerge. I take a look at stocks sometimes, and I bought some Tesla stock. I pay attention to the news, okay? I do. And I was talking about this. It's kind of dumb of me to see a story in the news, to know what's going to happen, and then not buy stock. Now, I'm not going to buy stock in bad companies, but I saw Tesla stock dip. I read the news all day, every day, so I know quite a bit about why the stock was perceivably dipping and why it was probably going to go up. And I thought to myself, maybe for once I should buy some stock because I'm watching and reading all this. So I did. I bought a bunch of Tesla and I made a lot of money. Hey, how about that? The point is, I'm looking at the news and I can see they're claiming that Elon is a potty mouth. Stock drops. They say that Tesla's performance actually ain't all that bad. It's just that Elon won't shut up. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds to me like the press is damaging Tesla stock. But the moment some report comes out showing Tesla's doing well, you're going to see a major bump in that stock. Or at the very least, it was artificially low. I don't know what ended up happening. All I know is, based on the news that I read, it seemed like it was going to rebound, and this was the dip. So I said, all right, I'll buy a bunch. And then sure enough, it like doubled in price. Here's what I see now. I see human beings. It's been over 7 years. It's been 8 years since they've been screaming nonsense lies. And they say that every cell in your body gets replaced every 7 years. Ship of Theseus, as it were. This means that there are people who live, whose whole body is composed of cells built upon lies during this period. There are children who were 10 years old when Donald Trump was running for office. In fact, some of them may have been 8 or 9. Trump then gets elected at the end of 2016. The end. Think about the range of children who will be voting in 2024. How about that? That's crazy, isn't it? Now think about all the 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds who didn't vote for Trump the first time. How many of them voted for Biden in 2020? Vosh, for instance, the socialist YouTuber, said he was too young to remember any of what Joe Biden did. You see, this is how it goes. You have a young generation. They don't know what Joe Biden was all about. They don't know what Democrats are all about. All they know is what they're told. This is why they're going to schools and indoctrinating children. So in 2024, there will be a primary. The media will be more insane than you've ever seen. The violence will escalate to such a degree you will be shocked. And then I think after Trump wins, he might not. Understand that while Joe Biden got a lot of votes and a lot of people don't believe it, it was through ballot harvesting. Trump did also gain 12 million, I think about 12 million new voters. There are going to be a lot of older people who look at what Joe Biden has done to this country and they say no. There will be many young people who will vote for Democrats, but they're probably not going to be in large enough numbers. Just understand there will be a faction of children who grew up on the extremism of the far left, who are then shocked to find the fascists won, and it's going to be like Spain or Nazi Germany or Italy or whatever. It's not, but that's what they'll say. Then they fight. Angry young people being told it's the apocalypse, they fight. Maybe not in 2024. Maybe it will not be until 2036. But take a look at this map. Spanish Civil War, July 1936 to October 1937. International boundaries, populated places, Republicans and nationalists. And it's not a very good map. I can't find one that's a large resolution. But you can clearly see it doesn't make sense. Look, in this first map, you've got this area up here in the north. It's this huge chunk of land separated and controlled by the nationalists. Then you've got a tiny spot down here controlled by nationalists. It's all broken apart. Then you look over here and you can see that the nationalists gained territory and split a bunch of areas in half. It doesn't quite make sense, none of it. The nationalists slowly gained more control of the country. I think it ultimately does make sense. Socialists and communists are not going to be good fighters. The conservatives are more likely to be, and then they won. I suppose that wasn't the case in the Soviet Union or China, unfortunately for them. That may be the reality that we face here because we don't have a strong military culture. With these European countries, you had militaristic leaders, and they pushed back. In Russia And China, you didn't. They all bent the knee and they just gave in. They didn't want to fight. I think the U.S. is heading in that direction. We'll see. The reason I show you this map is because all of these people come out saying there can't be a civil war. Look at all the states and areas are all divided. It doesn't make sense because they've never actually seen a real civil war and they don't study history. History will show you that most civil wars are not easily divided lines. This idea that Illinois as a state can maintain its jurisdictional boundaries. West Virginia split off from Virginia in the American Civil War. Here's what's possible. If war were to break out, the New York Metro, which includes Jersey, which includes Connecticut, will probably become a centralized jurisdiction. The people who live there may still treat its boundaries as such, but outside, the jurisdictional boundaries of states will be meaningless. I mean, they already mostly are, to be honest. But in the rural areas of Connecticut and New York, these people are not going to be in line with socialists or communists. Thus, the boundaries of this country will rapidly transform, and states will become meaningless. Chicago up to Milwaukee will become one complete left-leaning jurisdiction, but Southern Illinois is Republican. I don't know exactly where the lines will be drawn. This is a much bigger country than Spain. I suppose we'll see. Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe I'm wrong about it all. Certainly hope so. But what do you think is going to happen when people who are 10 years old watching the Trump stuff go down vote in 2024? Well, you tell me, comment. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see y'all then.